The State Department has revoked the visas of 6 people over accusations that they praised or celebrated the assassination of Charlie Kirk.
On X, the department writes, "The United States has no obligation to host foreigners who wish death on Americans." The State Department continues to identify visa holders who celebrated the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk. The President and Secretary Rubio will defend our borders, our culture, and our citizens by enforcing our immigration laws. Aliens who take advantage of America's hospitality while celebrating the assassination of our citizens will be removed. The department went on to list the 6 cases of foreign nationals who it says have now had their visas revoked. Most of them involve social media posts accusing Kirk of spreading racist or fascist rhetoric. The department did not specify what types of visas they held or whether they are currently living in the U.S.
The move is sparking some debate over free speech and whether or not visa holders have the same First Amendment rights as US citizens. YouTuber and writer Brad Polumbo says on X, "I condemn the substance of all of these social media posts, but most appear to be within the scope of the First Amendment. Revoking visas of legal residents for First Amendment protected speech, and I believe they are entitled to First Amendment rights, isn't constitutional." Attorney Ryan Mullally responded saying, quote, "I don't think there is clear case law controlling the extent of visa holders' First Amendment rights. We know they have such rights, but not how far they extend. Likely this issue will be teed up for the court sooner than later."
This news comes after President Trump honored Charlie Kirk with a posthumous Medal of Freedom on Tuesday, which would have been Kirk's 32nd birthday. His widow, Erica Kirk, accepted the award on his behalf, saying the president's support is something that she will cherish forever.
So obviously there's a lot to discuss here, Amber. You and I did this show very soon after Charlie Kirk's killing, and you knew him and had spoken to him numerous times. So, I mean, I have views on the politics of this, but why don't you sort of lead with what you think of all this?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think the really key thing here is that having a visa is a privilege, not a right. And the State Department can revoke a visa or grant a visa basically at its pleasure. There are some, obviously, rules that apply to visa holders, but ultimately the State Department gets the final say. They get to decide who comes into the U.S. and who does not. And I think there's a really great case to be made that someone who celebrates or is accepting of the murder of an American citizen who is merely exercising his free speech rights is a very good reason not to want that person in the country. I
would put the emphasis, I suppose, in a different place. Now, I'm in a slightly awkward position because it feels to me a little bit like I'm defending the rights of people who are insulting a friend of yours who was killed. And
I think you should speak for you. I'll be all right. I'm a big girl.
Well, that's fair enough. To my mind, the issue here is a kind of thin end of the wedge or slippery slope argument, because I see this in the context of various efforts by this administration that I see as aimed at the curtailment of free speech. So I think that is visible in relation to law firms, in relation to universities, in relation to some individuals. I mean, there was the woman, the Tufts student, who was detained in very murky circumstances where her wrongdoing appeared to have been writing an op-ed that was critical of Israel. That young woman was subsequently released. The State Department released the 6 quotes from some of the people. Now, to my mind, the evidence there is mixed. There are some that I wouldn't defend, and I have my phone out because I'm looking at them, where some of it is sort of like, there was one that said he didn't die, he died too late. Now, I think you can legitimately cast that as an incitement to violence. But there are other things like, for example, where a Mexican national said that Kirk, quote, died being a racist, he died being a misogynist. I don't, to me, I mean, that's a point of view that I would imagine lots of people who like Charlie Kirk find very offensive. But to my mind, that is not sufficient to try to expel someone from the country, which is what has effectively been done by revoking a visa. There was another one from a South African where, now he does refer to defenders of Kirk as Neanderthals, but he talks about believing that it was a racist rally. And Charlie Kirk won't be remembered as a hero. He was used to astroturf a movement of white nationalist trailer trash. Again, a strong view, but like, is it calling on people to commit crime? Is it inciting violence? I would argue no. And my bigger argument, I guess, is that when you start curtailing those kind of comments from people who have visas, then it's the beginning of a slippery slope where you try and curtail them for other people.
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, this comes down to a where you draw the line question, right? Which is, if you are in the business of deciding who comes into the United States on a visa, is awarded that privilege, then should we guarantee them all of the same free speech rights as Americans? Should we only draw the line at speech that is outside the scope of the First Amendment, such as incitement of violence? Or do we think there should actually be some viewpoint discrimination in who gets to come to the U.S. and who is granted that privilege? I think there should be some viewpoint discrimination to make sure that their cultural values align with what we want to see, and also that we're not bringing in people who either hate a certain political class of people or who hate American culture or values. And in this case, I think, dancing on the grave of someone who was assassinated is one of those values that I do not want to see visa holders have. Of course, there's always the danger of an administration who disagrees with me getting the State Department's power and deciding that they don't want to let in people who have conservative viewpoints. That's a concern. I think it's one that honestly I'm willing to take to get rid of people who would laugh at or celebrate the murder of Charlie.
You see, where I think I have difficulties, I mean, it's genuinely an interesting debate to have about who you let into the country and what importance you ascribe to their political or cultural views. Now, if someone was, for example, calling for the mass subjugation of women, right? I think that is questionable whether you want someone with that view in the country. If someone is outwardly calling for mass acts of violence, then I think that, or advocating for support of armed actions, I think that is questionable. When you get into things like cultural values, my concern there is that it can be interpreted by whatever administration is in power to simply prohibit people who have different political views. And I'm not sure that we want to be in the situation of conditioning entry into this country upon political views that would be valid for an American citizen to hold. You see the distinction I'm trying to get at?
I think for me it's less of a political question than it is a values-based question. So I would actually feel the same way about someone who said, for example, that Hassan Piker would deserve to die because he abused his dog on his Twitch stream.
Right.
That person I would equally not want in the country, because I don't want anyone coming here who is willing to justify the killing of someone because they held different political views, even if I don't share those political views.
Right. Okay. I mean, I think that's fair enough. Obviously, I just think that when we hand over or acknowledge the power of the government to do these things, we, I think, do need to be careful about not just suggesting that we can, an administration can import, as it were, people who they think agree with them and bar people who they think disagree with them. I think that's the danger here. People who have vigorous opposition to Charlie Kirk or Hassan Piker, I'm fine with. People who are calling for people like that to be shot dead, I have problems with. And I think that's, to me, the distinction is one of, are you advocating criminal action? Or are you simply expressing a view that some people find objectionable? Which is,
and I would obviously draw the line a little bit differently, which is it doesn't have to be an act of incitement, but if you are justifying or okay with, then I think that's sufficient enough to deny or revoke a visa. Now, I'm curious about what one of the individuals we talked about in the intro what the courts would say on this matter, right? Because we have had this really high-profile case of Mahmoud Khalil, who was able to be removed from the country. And I think that would probably set a baseline where the State Department would probably prevail on this question.
Yeah, I mean, that question's an interesting one, though, because this is the thing about excluding people who have adverse effects on the foreign policy interests of the United States or something.
Question.
Which, that I think is really interesting, whether it only applies to obviously political actors, like if you're the member of a particular political party, or whether it applies to people who are just espousing particular views. In any event, actress and wife of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and star of Curb Your Enthusiasm, Cheryl Hines, got into it with Sonny Hostin on The View yesterday. Stay with us for that.